everyone, welcome back to Programming for Beginners. This is Bttersweet, and today we'll be writing our first program together. I'll be giving you an introduction to our programming language, which is in Python. We'll set up our development environment together, and then we can get started on coding right away. So, let's do this. Many beginners often ask, what is the best programming language to get started with? There's so many programming languages out there, used for various purposes. And the easiest one to start with, in my opinion, and also my favorite one, would be Python. And there are two main reasons for that. The first one is that Python's syntax is super easy to understand and very beginner friendly. You can accomplish very complicated tasks using very few lines of code. And the second reason is that Python is very applicable to and very widely used in many different areas, such as web development, automation, data science, machine learning, AI, all these hot words that you hear from tech. So learning Python gives you the skill set to enter into any of these fields. And once you become comfortable with one programming language, it becomes not so difficult to pick up another one. So next, let's set up our Python development environment together. So first, we'll be downloading and installing Python. If you're using a Mac like I am, Python should come pre-installed, but we'll be downloading the latest version. Go to python.org, click the download button at the top to download the latest version. Open the file you just downloaded and follow the instructions to install Python. And if you're using Windows, make sure to check the box for add python.exe to path. Next, we'll be downloading our IDE. If you remember from our last lesson, an IDE is where we will be editing our code. And for this course, we'll be using an IDE called Sublime Text, but there are many IDEs out there depending on the developer's preferences. Go to sublimetext.com and click on the download button. Open the file you just downloaded and drag it into the application folder. After you finish installing, open Sublime, go to Tools, Build System, and make sure that Python is selected as the build system. Now that we have our IDE set up, we can start the exciting part. Today we're going to be writing a program to generate activity ideas for the weekend, so you can let Python tell you what to do this weekend. And if this is your first time coding, things may feel slightly overwhelming today, which is totally expected, because we'll be writing something cool together. And in the upcoming lessons, I will be explaining everything we encounter today in detail. So to get some weekend activity ideas, we'll be navigating to an URL. And this is the URL we'll be going to. Let's name this as activity_URL. And before we move any further, let's save this file first. You can save it anywhere that you like, and let's name it activitygenerator.py. The ending .py indicates that this is a Python file, and after saving it, you may notice that the color of the text changed, and that's because Sublime can now interpret this file as a Python file and execute it using Python. This URL may look like a website, but it's actually what we call an API. An API is a way for two programs or applications to talk to each other without knowing how each is implemented. And in our case, our Python program doesn't need to know where these activity ideas come from, and this activity idea provider doesn't care what our Python program does with it. All we need to do is to retrieve activity ideas through this API. Let's add a comment above this line. This is an API to get activity ideas. Notice that the hash sign in the front indicates that this entire line is a comment, and it won't be executed or interpreted as code. So to navigate to any URL actually needs a lot of code, such as communicating with the network and etc. But instead of writing everything from scratch, we can import what other people have already created. Think of the case where you're trying to build a house with Lego. Instead of building everything from scratch, maybe you can find a module named Kitchen, built by other people, and you can use it directly by attaching it to your house. In our case, there's already a module named Requests that handles sending and receiving URL requests, and it's available from the Python repository, which is where people upload a bunch of pre-made modules. Let's add a line at the top. Import requests to import this module named request. To be able to use this module, we actually also have to install it. And the easiest way is through a command line interface, if you remember from our last lesson. If you're using a Mac, open the application called Terminal. You can do so from Spotlight Search or from the application folder. And if you're using Windows, open up Command Prompt. Here I can install the module by typing pip3 install request, which is the name of our module. Pip is the tool that manages Python modules, or what developers also call dependencies, because our program depends on them. If you run into issues, check out the video description below for troubleshooting. Now that we have installed and imported the request module, let's use it to navigate to the URL. We do so by typing request get activity URL. And you can see that Sublime auto-completes this for us. And let's save the response and name it response. The final step is to display the response text, and we can do so by typing print response.text. Print is a super useful Python command for printing whatever is in the parentheses to the screen, and in our case, we want to print the text from response. So to run this Python program we just wrote, click on Tools, Build, or Command B on a Mac. If your program runs successfully, you should have gotten an activity. And in my case, the activity is catch up with a friend over a lunch date, and a bunch of other information. And I can run this again to get a different activity, learn calligraphy. You can run this as many times as you'd like. So congratulations on writing your first program. Don't worry if things feel a little overwhelming for now. In the next couple lessons, I will explain every bit that we saw today in much more detail, and you can find all the code for today's lesson in the GitHub link in the video description. So that's it for today. If you liked today's lesson, make sure to hit the subscribe button for the latest video updates, and I will see you in the next lesson.